Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
200 angels swore an oath on a mountain. They descended, they took wives, they taught humanity everything it was not ready to know. Their children ate the world. Somewhere around the 3rd century before Christ, someone wrote down a story that had been circulating for generations. Not a creation myth, not a law code, something stranger, a detailed account of how civilization went wrong at its source, how the arts that built cities, forged weapons, mapped stars, and painted faces all came from the same place, all at the same time, all given by beings who had no right to give them. The text is called First Enoch. It was quoted as prophecy in the New Testament. Tertullian, Clement of Alexandria, and Justin Martyr embraced it. It shaped early Christian ideas about angels, demons, heaven, and hell. Then, around the 4th century, the Western Church forgot it. One church did not forget, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, isolated from the theological politics of Europe, kept First Enoch in its 81-book biblical canon for 2,000 years. They preserved the complete text in Gez, their ancient liturgical language, while the rest of the world had nothing but fragments and footnotes. Then, in the 1940s, Bedouin shepherds stumbled into caves near the Dead Sea. Among the scrolls, they found 11 Aramaic manuscripts of First Enoch, older than anyone had expected. This is the story of that text, what it says, why it was buried, and what it means that the same pattern, superhuman beings descending to teach forbidden arts, appears not only here, but in Mesopotamia and Greece, in traditions that had no obvious reason to agree. The Book of the Watchers opens with a scene that reads like a conspiracy. 200 angels, the Watchers, assigned by God to observe humanity, gather on the summit of Mount Hermon. They know what they are about to do is forbidden. They know the consequences. So their leader, Semyaza, proposes a pact. They will all share the blame equally. Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. They swear. The text explains the mountain's name. Hermon derives from the Semitic root meaning oath or ban. The mountain is named for the crime committed on its summit. 200 watchers, organized in groups of 10, each under one of 20 chiefs. The text names them Semyaza, Arakiel, Ramiel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Barakiel, Azazel, and others. These names survive, with variations, in the Aramaic fragments from Qumran, in Greek passages preserved by the Byzantine chronicler George Synkelos, and in the Ethiopian Gez texts. They descend, they take human wives, and then they teach. The Book of Enoch does not describe the Watchers' teaching vaguely. It provides a syllabus. Azazel taught metallurgy, how to smelt iron, forge swords, craft shields and breastplates. He taught the extraction of metals from the earth, the making of jewelry, and the use of antimony for painting the eyelids. He revealed precious stones and dyeing techniques. In a single verse, the text credits one being with inventing the weapons industry, the mining industry, the jewelry trade, and the cosmetics industry. The other Watchers specialized. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, herbal and pharmaceutical magic. Armoros taught counter-enchantments, how to break spells. Barakiel taught astrology. Kokabiel taught the constellations. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. Sariel taught the course of the moon. Penemu taught writing with ink and paper. That list covers metallurgy, pharmacology, magic, counter-magic, astronomy, astrology, and literacy. These are the foundations of civilization, and in the Enochic framework, every single one arrived through a single act of angelic transgression. The text is not saying these arts are evil, Metallurgy builds plowshares as well as swords. Astronomy maps harvests as well as horoscopes. The problem, as First Enoch frames it, is not what was taught, but how and when. These were arts humanity was meant to develop on its own, gradually. Instead, they arrived all at once, from beings with their own motives. The Watchers wanted human wives. They bypassed the slow process of earned understanding. Knowledge without wisdom, power without maturity, the oldest technology critique in recorded literature. The union of Watchers and human women produced the Nephilim, the giants of Genesis chapter 6. But First Enoch expands on what Genesis leaves cryptic. The Nephilim were not just large, they were insatiable. They consumed everything humans produced. When food ran out, they turned on humanity itself, then on animals, then on each other, and finally they drank blood. This is the Enochic answer to why the flood was necessary. In Genesis, God sees that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. In First Enoch, that wickedness has a specific source, the hybrid offspring of beings that should never have mixed, raised on knowledge that should never have been given. When the Nephilim died, their story did not end. First Enoch provides one of the earliest systematic explanations for the origin of demons in Jewish literature. The spirits of the dead Nephilim, neither fully angelic nor fully human, became the evil spirits that afflict the living. They have no home in heaven or in Sheol. They wander the earth. This idea directly shaped early Christian demonology.
God responds. The archangel Raphael receives specific instructions regarding Azazel. Bind him hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, make an opening in the desert, the place called Dudael, cover him with rough and jagged rocks, let him remain there forever, cover his face that he may not see light. Bound in a desert pit, sealed in darkness until the final judgment when he will be cast into fire. The binding of Azazel in the wilderness connects to the Yom Kippur scapegoat ritual in Leviticus 16, where a goat for Azazel is sent into the desert bearing the sins of the people. Whether the fallen angel gave his name to the ritual or the ritual gave its name to the angel remains an open question. Now here is where the text becomes strange in a different way, not strange because of what it claims, but because of who else claims something similar. In Greek mythology, Prometheus is a titan who steals fire from heaven and gives it to humanity. But fire is only the beginning. In Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound, written in the 5th century before Christ, Prometheus lists his gifts: fire, house building, the rising and setting of stars, numbers, writing, animal domestication, medicines, dream interpretation, bird flight divination, and mining metals from the earth. Compare this to the Watchers' curriculum: metallurgy, weapons, cosmetics, astrology, enchantments, root cutting, writing. The overlap is extensive. Both traditions describe divine beings who cross a cosmic boundary to give humanity the arts of civilization, and both beings are punished by being bound to a rocky place. The moral framing differs. Greek tradition treats Prometheus with sympathy, a friend of humanity punished by a jealous god. First Enoch frames Azazel as a catastrophically harmful. His gifts corrupted the world. But the structural skeleton is the same: a divine being, a forbidden gift, a punishment involving binding and rocks. And the pattern reaches further back than Greece. In Mesopotamian mythology, the Apkallu were 7 antediluvian sages sent by the god Enki to teach humanity the arts of civilization before the flood: writing, agriculture, temple building, the interpretation of omens. The scholar Amar Anas argued in a 2010 article in the Journal for the Study of the Pseudepigrapha that the Watchers derived directly from the Apkallu tradition. The parallel is precise. Enoch is called the 7th from Adam in Genesis. The 7th Apkallu, Utu Abdazu, is the one who ascended to heaven. Enoch ascended to heaven. The Apkallu taught before the flood. The Watchers taught before the flood. Both traditions place the transfer of divine knowledge in the same narrative window.
But Anas argues the Jewish authors did not simply copy, they inverted the story. The Apkallu were benevolent teachers, the Watchers are rebellious corrupters. Same structure, opposite moral charge. 3 traditions. 3 sets of divine beings who taught forbidden arts before a catastrophic flood. 3 punishments involving binding. The pattern is documented, the explanation is incomplete. The history of First Enoch's survival is almost as strange as its content. The Epistle of Jude, which sits in every Christian Bible on earth, quotes First Enoch chapter 1, verse 9 almost word for word. Jude's author treated it as prophecy. Tertullian used it as authoritative scripture. Clement of Alexandria treated it as virtually inspired. Justin Martyr relied on the Enochic framework for his teaching about demons. Then the tide turned. Augustine rejected First Enoch, objecting to what he called fables about giants. His personal history may have colored this. Before converting to Christianity, Augustine had been a Manichaean, and the Manichaeans revered Enoch. Distancing himself from his former sect may have sharpened his hostility. Jerome excluded it from his Vulgate, the Latin Bible that defined Western scripture for 1,000 years. By the 5th century, the text had vanished from Western Christianity. But in Ethiopia, nothing changed. The Tewahedo Church continued copying, studying, and preaching First Enoch for 2 millennia. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce carried 3 Guise manuscripts back to Europe. Richard Lawrence published the first English translation in 1821. The West could finally read what Ethiopia had never lost. Then came the Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, Bedouin shepherds found clay jars in caves near Qumran on the northwest shore of the Dead Sea. Among thousands of fragments, 7 Aramaic manuscripts of First Enoch dated to around 200 to 150 years before Christ. 2 things stood out. First, the Aramaic fragments confirmed the Ethiopian Guise text was strikingly faithful. Scribes copying First Enoch for centuries in Ethiopian monasteries had preserved it with impressive accuracy. The church that remembered had remembered well. Second, one entire section was missing from Qumran. Not a single fragment of the Book of Parables, which describes the Son of Man as a pre-existent heavenly judge, appeared among the scrolls. Its absence remains one of the open questions in Enoch scholarship. Even after the Western Church dropped First Enoch from its canon, the ideas it planted kept growing. The Hebrew Bible says almost nothing about the afterlife. Sheol is a shadow realm. First Enoch contains the earliest detailed Jewish descriptions of places of reward and punishment, organized into specific chambers and levels. When medieval Christians imagined the geography of hell, they were drawing on a tradition First Enoch had established centuries before Dante. The Enochic explanation of demons, spirits of dead Nephilim wandering the earth, became the foundation of early Christian demonology. The New Testament's framework of possession and exorcism owes more to First Enoch than to anything in the Hebrew Bible. The Book of Parables describes a pre-existent figure called the Son of Man, the righteous one, the chosen one, who sits on a throne of glory to judge nations. The parallels with how Jesus describes himself in the Gospels cannot be missed. Whether Jesus drew on this tradition or the Book of Parables responded to early Christian claims or both drank from a common source remains debated. The connection itself is not. First Enoch's eschatology, the final judgment, destruction by fire, resurrection of the righteous, the eternal kingdom, provided the template that the Book of Revelation would later elaborate. The apocalyptic imagination of Christianity is built on Enochic foundations. A text was excluded from the Bible. Its ideas became the Bible's operating system. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and check out our other explorations of the texts, traditions, and forbidden knowledge that shaped the ancient world. Until next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.